The morning after the final trial, Ethan Cole woke up feeling a mix of relief and anticipation. He had faced his deepest fears and emerged stronger for it, but he knew the real test was yet to come. Princess Lyra had hinted that today would be the day of decision, the moment when she would announce whether or not he had succeeded in her trials. As he prepared himself mentally, Ethan couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come since stepping through that shimmering portal from Earth. When he arrived at the Grand Hall, where Lyra awaited him, he found her seated on a raised platform, surrounded by advisors and courtiers. The room buzzed with quiet murmurs, and all eyes turned to Ethan as he entered. He felt a pang of nervousness, but reminded himself to stay calm. Whatever happened next, he had given his best effort, and that was enough. Lyra stood, her presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. She looked regal, her golden hair flowing like sunlight, but there was also a softness in her, expression that hadn't been there before. "Ethan Cole," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the hall, "you have completed all my trials. Few who have come before you have even survived this long. Your strength, intelligence, empathy, and honesty have set you apart." A murmur rippled through the crowd, some nodding approvingly while others exchanged skeptical glances. Ethan remained still, listening intently. Lyra continued, "But these trials were not just about proving your worth. They were about understanding what kind of leader you could become. A ruler must be more than powerful. They must be wise, compassionate, and adaptable. Today I will share my decision." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the room. Then, turning to face Ethan directly, she said, "I have decided to accept you as my equal partner, not because you are perfect, but because you embrace your imperfections and strive to grow. Together, we can forge a new path for our worlds." For a moment, Ethan simply stared at her, stunned. He hadn't expected such an outcome. Most suitors sought to win Lyra's hand in marriage, hoping to claim her throne or secure prestige. But Lyra wasn't offering him power, she was offering collaboration, partnership, and trust. It was more than he could have hoped for. "Thank you," Ethan managed to say, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. "I won't let you down." Lyra smiled faintly. "See that you don't. There is much work to be done and many challenges ahead. But together, I believe we can achieve great things." As the announcement sank in, the court erupted into discussion. Some of Lyra's advisors appeared uneasy, whispering among themselves about the implications of choosing a human as her partner. Others seemed cautiously optimistic, intrigued by Ethan's unique qualities. Lyra silenced them with a sharp glance, making it clear that her decision was final. After the formalities ended, Lyra led Ethan to a private balcony overlooking the city. Below them, towering spires and glowing streets stretched as far as the eye could see. The sight was breathtaking, a blend of advanced technology and natural beauty that left Ethan speechless. "Do you understand what this means?" Lyra asked, breaking the silence. "To stand beside me is not just an honor, it's a responsibility. My people look to me for guidance, and now they will look to us. We must unite them, inspire them, and lead them toward a brighter future." Ethan nodded, taking in the enormity of the task ahead. "I know it won't be easy," he replied, "but I'm ready to learn, to listen, and to do whatever it takes to help. You've shown me that leadership isn't about ruling over others, it's about working with them." Lyra studied him for a moment, her glowing eyes filled with admiration. "You truly are different from anyone I've ever met," she said. Softly, most leaders focus on control, on maintaining order no matter the cost. But you seek connection, balance. That's rare, especially in someone from a world as chaotic as yours. Ethan chuckled nervously. Earth has its problems, but it also has hope. People there may argue and fight, but they always find ways to come together when it matters most. Maybe that's something we can bring here to Zorathia. Lyra tilted her head slightly, considering his words. Hope is a powerful thing, she admitted. Perhaps it's time we embraced it more openly. They spent the rest of the afternoon discussing their plans for the future. Lyra explained the political landscape of Zorthia, the tensions between factions, and the challenges facing her planet. Ethan listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions and offering suggestions based on his experiences back home. Go. He lacked formal training in governance. His practical mindset and ability to relate to others proved invaluable by evening. They returned to the palace gardens, where lanterns cast a warm glow over the tranquil space. Ethan felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in days. For the first time since arriving on Zorthia, he allowed himself to imagine a life alongside Lyra, working together to build bridges and create lasting change. "You've changed me," Lyra said suddenly, her tone softer than usual. "Before you came, I believed perfection was the only path forward. But watching you navigate these trials has taught me that growth comes from embracing flaws, not hiding them." Ethan smiled, touched by her words. "And you've changed me too," he replied. "I used to think success meant proving myself to others. Now I realize it's about staying true to who I am and helping others do the same." They sat together, in comfortable silence, gazing at the stars above. For all their differences, Ethan and Lyra shared a common goal: to make their worlds better, not just for themselves, but for everyone around them. As the night deepened, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but he knew one thing for certain: he wouldn't face it alone. The fifth trial began at dawn, and Ethan Cole felt a chill run down his spine as he followed Princess Lyra to the base of Mount Solace. The mountain loomed above them, its peak shrouded in perpetual twilight. Unlike the previous challenges, this one carried an air of mystery and solemnity. Lyra explained that the final test would require Ethan to confront his deepest fears and desires, a journey into the heart of his own mind. "This trial is not just about courage," Lyra said, her voice steady but tinged with warning. "It's about honesty. You must face what lies within you and emerge unchanged or change for the better." Ethan nodded, though his hands trembled slightly. He had faced physical battles, solved complex puzzles, and mediated conflicts, but this was different. This challenge demanded something far more personal. Taking a deep breath, he stepped onto the glowing platform at the foot of the mountain. As soon as his feet touched the surface, the world around him dissolved into darkness. When the scene reformed, Ethan found himself standing in the middle of his childhood home. The small house looked exactly as he remembered it: faded wallpaper, creaky wooden floors, and the faint smell of his mother's cooking lingering in the air. For a moment, he felt a wave of nostalgia wash over him. But then he noticed something odd. Shadows moved in the corners of the room, twisting and writhing like living things. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was his younger self, no older than 10 years old. The boy stared at him with wide, accusing eyes. "Why did you leave?" the child asked, his voice trembling. "You promised you'd always be here." Ethan froze, his chest tightening. He hadn't thought about those promises in years. Back then, he'd sworn to stay close to his family, to protect them. But life had pulled him in different directions: jobs, responsibilities, dreams of adventure. Now, staring at the boy he felt the weight of broken vows. "I didn't mean to leave," Ethan replied softly. "I wanted to make something of myself. I thought I could still come back." The boy shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "You forgot about us." "About me." Ethan reached out, but the boy vanished, replaced by another shadowy figure, his father. His dad stood tall and stern, just as Ethan remembered him before illness took its toll. "You ran away," the man said, his tone harsh. "When we needed you most, you were gone." Ethan clenched his fists, guilt surging through him. "I didn't know how to help," he admitted, his voice breaking. "I didn't know what to do." His father's expression softened, and for a brief moment, Ethan saw the man he had loved, not the ghost haunting his memories. Running doesn't solve anything, his father said gently. But neither does staying if your heart isn't in it. Find balance, son. With that, the vision faded, leaving Ethan alone in the dark once again. He sank to his knees, overwhelmed by emotion. These weren't just illusions, they were fragments of his past, pieces of himself he had buried deep inside. But the trial wasn't over yet. The next scene transported him to a bustling cityscape. Skyscrapers stretched toward the sky, their windows reflecting sunlight that seemed too bright, almost blinding. Ethan recognized the place. It was Chicago, where he had spent several years working as an engineer. He saw himself walking briskly down the street, dressed in a suit, clutching a briefcase. It was the version of him who had chased success at all costs, sacrificing friendships, hobbies, and even sleep along the way. Suddenly, the crowd parted, revealing a woman standing across the street. She wore a simple dress and carried a sketch pad under her arm. Her name was Claire, and she had been his closest friend during those years. They had shared late-night conversations about art, science, and life itself. But when work consumed him, their friendship had faded. "You stopped dreaming," Claire said, her voice gentle but firm. "You traded wonder for routine. Was it worth it?" Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He couldn't deny the truth in her statement. Somewhere along the way, he had lost sight of the passions that once defined him. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Before he could dwell on it further, the scene shifted again. This time, he stood on a barren wasteland under a blood-red sky. The ground cracked beneath his feet, and the air smelled of ash. In the distance, he saw a throne made of twisted metal, and seated upon it was a version of himself, but darker, colder, and utterly devoid of compassion. "Give up," the figure sneered, rising from the throne. "You don't belong here. You're weak, ordinary. No matter how hard you try, you'll never measure up." Ethan backed away, his heart pounding. This wasn't just fear, it was doubt, amplified to unbearable levels. The shadowy version of himself advanced, each step echoing like thunder. "Look at you," it continued, "a human among gods. What makes you think you can win her respect? Her love?" For a moment, Ethan faltered. The word struck a nerve, tapping into insecurities he had tried to ignore. But then he remembered something Lyra had said earlier. This trial wasn't just about facing fears, it was about honesty. And the honest truth was that he was afraid. Afraid of failure, of rejection, of not being enough. But running from those feelings wouldn't change anything. Summoning every ounce of courage, Ethan stepped forward instead of retreating. "You're right," he said, locking eyes with the shadow. "I'm not perfect. I'm scared, and I've made mistakes. But I'm still here, still trying. That has to count for something." The shadow snarled, lunging toward him. But as Ethan stood his ground, it began to dissolve, crumbling into dust until nothing remained. The wasteland vanished, replaced by a peaceful forest bathed in golden light. Birds chirped overhead, and a cool breeze rustled the leaves. In the center of the clearing stood Lyra. She looked different here, not as a princess or a ruler, but as a person. Her glowing eyes held warmth rather than judgment, and her smile was soft and genuine. "You faced your fears," she said, stepping closer. "Not everyone can do that. Most turn away, hiding behind masks of strength or pride. But you chose to be honest with yourself and with me." Ethan exhaled slowly, feeling a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "It wasn't easy," he admitted. "Some of those things, I haven't thought about them in years. But maybe that's part of the problem. Ignoring them doesn't make them go away." Lyra nodded approvingly. "Acknowledging our flaws is the first step toward growth. Few possess the courage to do so. You've shown me that you're not just resilient, you're willing to evolve." She extended her hand, and Ethan took it without hesitation. As they walked side by side out of the forest, the simulation ended, returning them to the real world. The sun was setting over Mount Solace, casting long shadows across the landscape. Ethan glanced at Lyra, noticing how the fading light illuminated her features. There was a vulnerability in her expression now, one he hadn't seen before. It occurred to him that perhaps she understood his struggles more than he realized. After all, she too was bound by expectations, her people's hopes, her own doubts. "Thank you," Ethan said quietly, "for giving me a chance to prove myself not just to you, but to me." Lyra smiled faintly. "The trials are meant to reveal character, not create it. You've already proven yours, Ethan. Tomorrow, we will decide the future together." As they returned to the palace, Ethan felt a sense of peace settle over him. The hardest part was over, but he knew the journey wasn't finished. Whatever lay ahead, he was ready to face it, not because he wanted to win Lyra's approval, but because he wanted to become the best version of himself. The fourth trial began early the next morning, and Ethan Cole found himself standing in a large circular room filled with holographic projections of alien figures. The walls shimmered with light, creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere. Princes. Lyra stood nearby, her arms crossed as she observed him carefully. Today's challenge was different from the others. It wasn't about strength, skill, or even intellect. This time, Ethan would face a test of empathy and diplomacy. Lyra explained. "The task? You will enter a simulated conflict between 3 factions. Each group has its own goals, grievances, and fears. Your job is to find a way to resolve their disputes without favoring one side over the others. Failure means losing their trust and failing this trial." Ethan nodded, though his stomach tightened with nerves. He had never been much of a negotiator back on Earth, but he understood the importance of listening and finding common ground. Taking a deep breath, he stepped into the simulation. The scene shifted instantly. He was now standing in a bustling marketplace surrounded by towering structures that seemed to blend organic and mechanical design. Alien beings of various shapes and sizes moved about, some arguing loudly while others muttered angrily under their breath. 3 distinct groups emerged from the chaos, each marked by unique symbols on their clothing or skin. The first faction, known as the Valens, were tall and slender, with iridescent scales that shimmered in the light. They spoke passionately about their need for access to fresh water sources, which they claimed were being monopolized by another group. Their leader, a stern-looking individual named Kale, demanded immediate action to address what he called an injustice. The second faction, the Torsa, were shorter and stockier, with thick fur covering their bodies. They argued that the Valens' demands were unreasonable because they relied on the same water sources for agriculture. Their spokesperson, a fiery female named Rin, accused the Valens of hoarding resources during dry seasons, leaving the Torsa struggling to feed their families. Finally, there was the third faction, the Zanari, who appeared humanoid but had translucent skin that glowed faintly. They insisted that both the Valens and the Torsa were ignoring the environmental impact of their actions. Their leader, a calm yet firm elder named Sira, warned that continued exploitation of the planet's resources would lead to disaster for everyone. Ethan listened carefully as each faction presented their case. At first, it seemed impossible to find a solution that satisfied all sides. The arguments grew louder and more heated, and several members of the factions began shouting at one another. Ethan knew he had to act quickly before the situation spiraled out of control. He raised his hands to signal for quiet. "I hear you," he said firmly but calmly. "Each of your concerns is valid, and I want to understand them better. But fighting won't solve anything. Let's talk about how we can work together." His words didn't immediately silence the crowd, but they did create a brief pause. Seizing the opportunity, Ethan turned to Kale, the Valen leader. "Tell me more about your water needs," he asked. "What exactly are you asking for?" Kale hesitated, then explained that his people required consistent access to clean water for survival. They lived in arid regions where natural sources were scarce, and recent droughts had made things worse. Ethan nodded thoughtfully, jotting down notes on a small tablet provided by the simulation. Next, he approached Rin, the Torsa leader. "And what about your people?" he asked. "How does the lack of water affect your farms?" Rin described how crop failures had led to food shortages, forcing her people to travel farther for supplies. She emphasized that the Torsa weren't trying to harm anyone. They simply needed enough water to sustain their livelihoods. Finally, Ethan spoke with Sira, the Zanari elder. "You're worried about the environment," he said. "Can you explain what specific risks you see if nothing changes?" Sira explained that overuse of water sources was causing erosion and destabilizing ecosystems. If left unchecked, it could lead to irreversible damage, harming not just the Zanari, but all life on the planet. With a clear understanding of each faction's perspective, Ethan began brainstorming solutions. He suggested implementing a rotating schedule for water usage, ensuring that each group received fair access based on their needs. To address environmental concerns, he proposed investing in technology to purify and recycle water, reducing waste and minimizing harm to the ecosystem. At first, the factions resisted his ideas, skeptical that such compromises could work. But Ethan persisted, explaining the benefits of cooperation and emphasizing the shared goal of long-term survival. Slowly, the leaders started to listen. Kale agreed to share water during critical periods, while Rin promised to adopt more efficient farming techniques. Sarah, impressed by Ethan's willingness to incorporate ecological safeguards, pledged her support for the plan. As the simulation concluded, the factions shook hands, or whatever equivalent gesture their species used, signaling a tentative agreement. Ethan exhaled deeply, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. He hadn't expected the process to be easy, but he was proud of what they had accomplished together. When Ethan stepped out of the simulation, he found Lyra waiting for him. Her expression was thoughtful, and for once, she didn't seem guarded or distant. "That was unexpected," she admitted. "Most suitors try to impose their own solutions without truly understanding the problem. You took the time to listen and adapt." Ethan shrugged modestly. "It's not about winning or losing. It's about making sure everyone feels heard and respected. Sometimes the best answers come from working together." Lyra studied him for a moment, her glowing eyes reflecting a mix of curiosity and admiration. There was something uniquely human about Ethan's approach, his ability to connect with others, even when they were vastly different from him. She had seen countless warriors, scholars, and diplomats fail her trials, yet this unassuming man from Earth continued to surprise her. "Tomorrow's trial will be the most difficult," she said finally. "It will test your inner self, your fears, desires, and truths. Be prepared." Ethan nodded, though the weight of her words settled heavily on his shoulders. He knew the challenges were far from over, but he also felt a growing sense of confidence. Each trial pushed him to his limits, but they also revealed strengths he hadn't realized he possessed. Later that evening, Ethan wandered through the palace gardens, reflecting on the day's events. The air was cool and fragrant, filled with the scent of alien flowers. He thought about the factions in the simulation, their struggles, their hopes, and their eventual willingness to cooperate. It reminded him of Earth, where conflicts often arose from misunderstandings and fear. Maybe the same principles of empathy and collaboration could help bridge divides there too. As he walked, he noticed Lyra sitting on a bench overlooking a tranquil pond. She glanced up as he approached, her expression softening slightly. "Do you ever miss your world?" she asked. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Sometimes. It's not perfect, but it's home. There's beauty in its imperfections. You know? Even the chaos has a kind of charm." Lyra smiled faintly. "Perhaps that's why humans fascinate me. You embrace uncertainty in ways we've forgotten how to do." They sat in silence for a while, watching the water ripple under the light of Zorathia's twin moons. For the first time since arriving, Ethan felt a genuine connection with Lyra, not as a princess testing him, but as someone searching for meaning just like him. Whatever tomorrow brought, he knew he wouldn't face it alone. The morning after the arena trials, Ethan Cole woke up in a quiet chamber provided by Princess Lyra's court. The room was simple but elegant, with soft lighting and walls that seemed to shimmer faintly, as if alive. Despite the comfort of the bed, Ethan hadn't slept well. His body ached from the battles, and his mind raced with thoughts about what lay ahead. He knew the challenges weren't over, far from it. Lyra had made it clear that passing her test would require more than physical strength or combat skill. Today, she would test his intellect. Ethan dressed quickly and followed a guide to a large domed hall where Lyra awaited him. She stood at the center of the room, surrounded by holographic displays and floating panels covered in symbols and diagrams. Her expression was calm but focused, and Ethan could tell she was eager to see how he would handle this next trial. Today, Lyra began, her voice steady and clear. You will face puzzles and riddles tied to the history and technology of my people. Success depends not only on your ability to solve them, but also on your creativity and adaptability. Are you ready? Ethan nodded, though his stomach churned with nerves. He wasn't a genius by any means, but he had always been good at problem solving. Growing up, he'd spent hours tinkering with broken machines and figuring out how things worked. Maybe that experience would help him now. Lyra gestured to the first puzzle, a massive sphere floating in midair. Its surface was covered in intricate patterns that shifted and changed as Ethan approached. A series of glowing runes appeared around the base of the sphere, forming a question. What binds all things yet cannot be seen? Ethan frowned, staring at the sphere. He walked around it slowly, trying to make sense of the question. It sounded like a riddle, but he wasn't sure what the answer could be. He thought back to his childhood, when his grandfather used to tell him stories about nature and science. Then it hit him gravity. Gravity held everything together, even though it couldn't be seen. He spoke the word aloud, and the sphere responded instantly. The patterns on its surface rearranged themselves, forming a map of constellations. A new challenge appeared. Align the stars to reveal the path. Ethan studied the map carefully. The constellations were unfamiliar, but he noticed that certain stars glowed brighter than others. Using trial and error, he adjusted the positions of the glowing stars until they formed a straight line. As soon as the alignment was correct, the sphere emitted a soft hum, and a beam of light shot upward, illuminating a doorway on the far side of the room. Lyra watched silently, her arms crossed. She didn't offer hints or encouragement, but Ethan could feel her eyes on him, evaluating every move. He took a deep breath and stepped through the doorway, entering a second chamber filled with mechanical devices and glowing crystals. In the center of the room was a pedestal holding a small cube. When Ethan touched it, the walls came alive with projections of ancient Zorathian machinery. A voice echoed through the room, explaining the task. Repair the machine to restore balance. Ethan examined the projection closely. It showed a complex system of gears, levers, and energy conduits. Some parts were damaged or missing, and Ethan had to figure out how to fix them using the tools scattered around the room. At first, he felt overwhelmed. The machine was unlike anything he'd ever seen, and the alien technology seemed impossibly advanced. But then he remembered something important. Machines, no matter how complicated, operated on basic principles. He started by identifying the power source, a glowing crystal embedded in the center of the device. From there, he traced the flow of energy, looking for breaks or blockages in the system. One section of the machine had a broken gear. Ethan searched the room and found a replacement part among the tools. He carefully installed it, making sure it fit snugly before moving on to the next issue. Another part of the machine required recalibration, which involved adjusting a series of dials until the energy flow stabilized. It took time and patience, but eventually the machine roared to life, its components spinning smoothly and emitting a harmonious hum. The final puzzle awaited him in a third chamber. This one was different. It wasn't about solving a specific problem, but rather about understanding the bigger picture. The room contained a massive holographic model of Zorathia's solar system, complete with planets, moons, and orbital paths. Floating above the model was a single question: how do we ensure harmony among our worlds? Ethan stared at the display, unsure where to begin. Harmony was a broad concept, and he wasn't an expert on interplanetary politics. But he remembered Lyra's earlier trials and the lessons they taught him. Strength without empathy was hollow, and solutions required collaboration. Drawing on these ideas, he proposed a plan that combined resource sharing, open communication, and mutual respect between civilizations. As he explained his reasoning, the hologram responded positively. The planets aligned perfectly, and a bright light filled the room. Ethan turned to Lyra, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. For the first time, he saw a hint of approval in her eyes. "You've done well," she said finally, stepping closer. Most suitors focus solely on technical answers, ignoring the underlying philosophy. You've shown insight and foresight. Ethan shrugged modestly. "I just tried to think about what makes sense, not just for machines, but for people too." Lyra tilted her head slightly, intrigued. There was something refreshing about Ethan's approach. He didn't rely on arrogance or brute force. Instead, he combined logic with compassion, qualities that were rare among those who sought her hand. She motioned for him to follow her out of the chamber, signaling that the day's trials were over. As they walked together through the palace corridors, Lyra asked Ethan about Earth. What was it like? How did humans solve problems there? Ethan described his world the mix of technology and tradition, the diversity of cultures, and the constant push for progress despite challenges. He spoke honestly, sharing both the strengths and flaws of humanity. Lyra listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that revealed her own curiosity about the universe beyond. Zora Thia. By the time they reached the gardens outside the palace, the sun, or rather Zorathia's equivalent of a sun, was setting, casting a golden glow over the landscape. Ethan paused, taking in the beauty of the alien flora and the distant mountains. It struck him how much this place felt both foreign and familiar, like a dream he didn't want to wake up from. "You're not like the others," Lyra said suddenly, breaking the silence. Her tone was softer now, almost contemplative. "You don't claim to have all the answers, and you admit your weaknesses. That takes courage." Ethan smiled faintly. "I'm just doing my best. I know I'm not perfect, but maybe that's okay. Sometimes the best solutions come from learning along the way." Lyra regarded him for a moment longer, then nodded. "Tomorrow's trial will test your ability to navigate conflict and find common ground. Be prepared." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Ethan alone in the garden. He exhaled slowly, feeling a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. Each trial brought new challenges, but they also gave him a chance to prove himself not just to Lyra, but to himself. Whatever tomorrow held, he knew he wouldn't give up without a fight. After emerging victorious from the labyrinth of shadows, Ethan Cole found himself standing in a grand arena surrounded by towering walls made of shimmering metal. The air buzzed with anticipation as crowds of aliens gathered in the stands above, their glowing eyes fixed on him. Princess Lyra stood nearby, her expression unreadable, but her posture relaxed. She had already seen countless suitors fail her challenges, and while Ethan had impressed her with his performance in the labyrinth, she wasn't ready to lower her guard just yet. Ethan glanced around, taking in the scene. He felt out of place among these advanced beings, but he reminded himself that panicking wouldn't help. Instead, he focused on staying calm and observant. Lyra stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly across the arena. "The second trial tests strength and skill," she announced. "You will face my warriors in combat. Show us what you are capable of." Before Ethan could respond, a group of armored fighters entered the arena. They were tall and muscular, their weapons gleaming under the artificial lights. Each one moved with precision, exuding confidence and power. Ethan swallowed hard. These weren't ordinary opponents, they were trained soldiers, likely faster and stronger than anyone he'd ever faced. But backing down wasn't an option. Lyra gestured for the first warrior to step forward. He was a hulking figure, at least twice Ethan's size, with skin that seemed to shimmer like molten silver. His weapon was a long staff tipped with energy blades that crackled ominously. The crowd roared in excitement as the warrior took his position, waiting for Ethan to make the first move. Ethan didn't have a weapon, so he relied on his wits and agility. As the warrior charged toward him, Ethan sidestepped quickly, avoiding the swing of the staff. The blade sliced through the air where he had been standing moments before, leaving a scorch mark on the ground. Ethan rolled to the side, grabbing a discarded shield from the edge of the arena. It wasn't much, but it would provide some protection. Fight continued, with Ethan dodging and weaving around the warrior's attacks. He noticed patterns in the warrior's movements, predictable strikes that left openings if timed correctly. When the opportunity arose, Ethan struck back, using the shield to bash the warrior's arm and knock the staff loose. The crowd gasped in surprise as the weapon clattered to the ground. Without hesitation, Ethan kicked the warrior's legs out from under him, sending him crashing to the floor. The warrior conceded defeat, rising to his feet and bowing respectfully. Ethan nodded in return, catching his breath. This victory gave him a small boost of confidence, but he knew there were more opponents to face. One by one, Lyra's warriors stepped into the arena, each presenting new challenges. Some wielded bladed weapons, while others relied on brute force or speed. Ethan adapted quickly, using whatever tools he could find in the environment to level the playing field. At one point, he faced a female warrior who moved with incredible grace and precision. Her twin daggers flashed in the light as she closed in on him, forcing him to retreat. Just when it seemed like she might overwhelm him, Ethan spotted a pile of debris near the edge of the arena. With a quick burst of speed, he dove behind it, causing the warrior to stumble slightly as she overextended her attack. Seizing the moment, Ethan grabbed a piece of broken pipe and used it to deflect her daggers. After a tense exchange, he managed to disarm her, earning another hard-fought victory. As the battles wore on, Ethan began to tire. Sweat dripped down his face, and his muscles ached from the constant movement. Still, he refused to give up. Every time he thought he couldn't go on, he remembered why he was here, to prove himself not only to Lyra, but also to himself. Failure wasn't an option. Finally, after defeating several warriors, Lyra called for a pause. The crowd murmured, excitedly, clearly impressed by Ethan's performance. No human had ever lasted this long in the arena. But Lyra wasn't done testing him yet. She stepped into the ring herself, holding a sleek sword that hummed with energy. Her gaze locked onto Ethan's, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of genuine curiosity in her eyes. "You've done well," she said, her tone measured. "But now you face me. Prove that your resilience extends beyond mere survival." Ethan nodded, gripping the makeshift weapon he had scavenged earlier. Facing Lyra was different from fighting her warriors. She wasn't just physically formidable. Her intelligence and strategy made her a far more dangerous opponent. From the moment they clashed, Ethan realized this wouldn't be a battle of brute strength alone. It required finesse, timing, and creativity. Lyra attacked with calculated precision, her sword slicing through the air with deadly accuracy. Ethan blocked and parried as best he could, but he soon realized he couldn't win by simply defending himself. He needed to think differently. During a brief lull in the fight, he scanned the arena, looking for anything he could use to his advantage. Spotting a loose panel on the wall, he feigned a stumble, drawing Lyra closer. As she lunged toward him, he kicked the panel free, sending it sliding across the ground and momentarily obstructing her path. The distraction gave Ethan enough time to regain his footing and counterattack. Though he couldn't match Lyra's skill with a blade, he fought with determination and adaptability. Every time she landed a blow, he adjusted his stance and tried a new approach. The duel became a dance of strategy and endurance, neither fighter willing to yield. Eventually, both combatants grew weary, their movements slower but no less deliberate. In a final clash, their weapons locked together, and they stood inches apart, breathing heavily. Lyra studied Ethan's face, searching for signs of weakness. What she found instead was resolve, a quiet strength that refused to falter. With a subtle nod, she stepped back, lowering her sword. "Enough," she declared, her voice firm but tinged with admiration. "You have shown remarkable skill and tenacity. Few can withstand such trials." The crowd erupted into cheers, but Ethan barely heard them. He leaned on his makeshift weapon, trying to steady his breathing. For the first time since arriving on Zorothea, he allowed himself a small smile. He hadn't defeated Lyra, not fully, but he had earned her respect. And in that moment, he realized that winning wasn't about overpowering others. It was about proving to yourself that you could rise to any challenge. As Lyra approached him, she extended a hand to help him up. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then accepted it. Their eyes met, and for the briefest instant, something passed between them, an unspoken understanding that this journey was far from over. Ethan Cole had always been a man of simple tastes. Born in a small town in the Midwest, he grew up surrounded by cornfields and endless skies. He wasn't someone who sought attention or fame. In fact, most people would describe him as quiet, thoughtful, and practical. But life has a way of pulling even the most ordinary individuals into extraordinary situations. For Ethan, that moment came when a strange message appeared on his old computer screen one night. It was late, and the house was silent except for the faint hum of the fan. Ethan sat at his cluttered desk, sipping a cup of coffee while scrolling through news articles about space exploration. Suddenly, the screen flickered, and a line of text appeared in bold letters. Princess Lyra of Zorothea extends an invitation to Ethan Cole of Earth. Below it was a set of coordinates and instructions to activate a portal device if he wished to accept. At first, Ethan thought it was some kind of prank. Who would send something like this? And why him? But curiosity got the better of him. After all, how often does a person get invited to another planet? The next morning, armed with nothing more than a backpack containing a change of clothes, a flashlight, and a notebook, Ethan followed the instructions. He drove to an abandoned field outside town, where the air seemed unusually still. Following the directions carefully, he pressed a sequence of buttons on the small device that had materialized along with the message. A shimmering oval of light erupted before him, pulsating like liquid silver. Taking a deep breath, Ethan stepped through. On the other side, he found himself standing in a vast hall filled with towering columns and glowing crystals embedded in the walls. The air smelled sweet, almost floral, and the temperature was warm but comfortable. Before he could take in everything, a group of aliens approached him. They were tall and slender, their skin shimmering faintly in shades of blue and green. Their eyes glowed softly, giving them an otherworldly appearance. One of them spoke in perfect English, welcoming him to Zorothea and explaining that he had been summoned to participate in Princess Lyra's trials. Ethan nodded, trying to keep his expression calm despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. He had read enough science fiction to know that alien worlds often came with dangers, but he reminded himself that running away wouldn't solve anything. Besides, there was something intriguing about the whole situation. Why had they chosen him? What made him special? Before long, Ethan was escorted to the throne room where Princess Lyra awaited. She sat on a raised dais, her posture regal and commanding. Her presence was striking, her hair flowed like molten gold, and her eyes sparkled with intelligence and authority. She wore a sleek outfit adorned with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. Despite her beauty, there was no mistaking the power she radiated. This was not someone to be trifled with. "Ethan Cole," she began, her voice smooth yet firm. "You have entered my realm seeking to prove yourself worthy. Many have come before you, each confident in their abilities. Yet none have succeeded. Are you prepared to face my challenges? Ethan swallowed hard, but met her gaze steadily. I'm ready, he replied. His voice didn't waver, though his heart pounded in his chest. Lyra studied him for a moment, as if weighing his sincerity. Then she gestured to one of her attendants, who handed Ethan a small crystal orb. This will guide you to the first trial, she explained. Do not underestimate its difficulty. Failure means immediate dismissal. With that, Ethan was led to a large doorway marked with glowing runes. Beyond it lay the Labyrinth of Shadows, a place infamous throughout the galaxy for breaking even the strongest contenders. The labyrinth was designed to test not just physical endurance, but mental fortitude as well. Illusions and traps lurked around every corner, preying on fear and doubt. Those who entered rarely emerged unscathed, if they emerged at all. As Ethan stepped into the dimly lit corridors, the doors slammed shut behind him, leaving him alone in near darkness. The walls seemed to pulse faintly, casting eerie shadows that danced across the floor. He gripped the crystal orb tightly, feeling its warmth against his palm. It emitted a soft glow, illuminating the path ahead just enough for him to see. The first few turns were straightforward, almost deceptively so. But soon, the labyrinth began to twist and shift unpredictably. Hallways doubled back on themselves, and dead ends appeared where none had been moments earlier. Just when Ethan started to feel disoriented, he heard whispers echoing around him. At first, they were faint, like distant voices carried by the wind. But they grew louder, forming words that pierced his mind. You'll never succeed. One voice sneered. She's too powerful for you. Another chimed in, mocking him. Why bother? You're just a human. What makes you think you're special? Ethan clenched his fists, forcing himself to focus. He recognized these voices for what they were, illusions meant to break his spirit. Instead of letting them consume him, he closed his eyes and took slow, deliberate breaths. When he opened them again, the whispers faded, replaced by silence. He moved forward cautiously, relying on logic rather than emotion to navigate the maze. At one point, he encountered a figure blocking his path. It looked exactly like him, down to the smallest detail, wearing the same clothes and carrying the same expression of determination. The duplicate smirked. Give up, it said. You don't belong here. For a moment, Ethan hesitated. Doubt crept into his mind, whispering that maybe the duplicate was right. Maybe he didn't belong in this alien world among these advanced beings. But then he remembered something his father used to say, belief is half the battle. With renewed resolve, Ethan stepped closer to the illusion and reached out to touch it. As his fingers brushed against its surface, the figure dissolved into smoke, leaving him free to continue. Hours passed, though time felt distorted within the labyrinth. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Ethan saw a faint light ahead. Pushing forward with renewed energy, he burst through the exit, emerging into a bright chamber where Lyra and several of her advisors waited. She regarded him with a mixture of surprise and approval. Few survived the labyrinth of shadows, she said, rising from her seat. Most succumbed to their fears. How did you manage to escape? Ethan shrugged modestly. I focused on what's real and ignored the rest. Lyra tilted her head slightly, intrigued. There was something about this human, his quiet confidence, his resilience, that set him apart from the others. Perhaps, she thought, he might actually be worth watching closely. The days that followed Lyra's announcement were a whirlwind of activity. Ethan Cole found himself thrust into the heart of Zorathian society, meeting diplomats, attending council meetings, and learning about the intricacies of governing the planet. So vastly different from Earth. It was overwhelming at times, but Ethan approached every task with determination and humility. He didn't pretend to have all the answers. He asked questions, listened carefully, and adapted quickly. Slowly but surely, he began to earn the respect of those around him. Lyra stood by his side throughout it all, guiding him when needed, but also giving him space to find his own footing. Their partnership evolved naturally, built on mutual trust and shared goals. Together, they tackled challenges both big and small, from resolving disputes between rival factions to brainstorming ways to improve trade routes across the galaxy. Each success brought them closer, not just as leaders, but as friends. One evening, after a particularly long day of negotiations, Ethan and Lyra retreated to a quiet corner of the palace gardens. The air was cool, carrying the sweet scent of alien flowers. They sat together beneath a canopy of glowing vines, watching as tiny bioluminescent creatures flitted through the air like living stars. "You've come a long way," Lyra said, breaking the silence. Her tone was gentle, almost reflective. "When you first arrived, I wasn't sure what to expect. Most suitors are so focused on proving themselves that they forget the true purpose of leadership, serving others." Ethan smiled faintly, leaning back against a bench. "I think I learned more from these trials than anyone expected, including me. Before coming here, I spent most of my life chasing success without really knowing what it meant. But now, I feel like I'm doing something that matters." Lyra nodded, her eyes softening. "That's what makes you special, Ethan. You don't seek power for its own sake. You want to make a difference, to leave things better than you found them. That's rare, especially in someone who's been given so much responsibility." Suddenly, Ethan hesitated, unsure how to respond. He had always thought of himself as ordinary, someone who blended into the background rather than standing out. But Lyra saw something in him that others might have missed: a quiet strength, a willingness to grow, and an unshakable belief in the goodness of people. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," he admitted finally. "You pushed me to be better, to see things I wouldn't have noticed on my own. And honestly, I think we balance each other pretty well." Lyra laughed softly, the sound melodic and warm. "Balance is key, isn't it? Too much of anything can tip the scales. Strength without compassion is hollow. Ambition without empathy leads to ruin. But together," she trailed off, gazing at the horizon where the twin moons cast their silvery light over the landscape. "Together, we can achieve something extraordinary." As the weeks turned into months, Ethan and Lyra worked tirelessly to unite their worlds. They introduced reforms aimed at fostering collaboration between species, investing in sustainable technologies, and addressing long-standing grievances among factions. At first, progress was slow, and resistance came from unexpected places. Some members of Lyra's court viewed Ethan's presence as a threat to tradition, while others doubted his ability to lead alongside their princess. But Ethan remained patient, earning trust one conversation at a time. Back on Earth, news of Ethan's journey spread like wildfire. Reports of his alliance with Princess Lyra captured the imagination of millions, sparking debates about humanity's place in the cosmos. Some hailed him as a hero, proof that even the most unlikely individuals could rise to greatness. Others dismissed the story as impossible or exaggerated. Either way, Ethan became a symbol of hope, a reminder that connections could be forged across vast distances and cultural divides. Despite the attention, Ethan stayed grounded. He kept in touch with his family through messages sent via interstellar communication devices provided by Lyra's people. His mother cried tears of joy during their first call, while his father offered gruff but heartfelt congratulations. Even Claire, his old friend from Chicago, reached out to say she was proud of him. These moments reminded Ethan of where he came from and why he had chosen this path in the first place. One day, Ethan accompanied Lyra to a remote village nestled in the mountains. The villagers greeted them warmly, offering gifts of handmade crafts and sharing stories of their struggles and triumphs. As Ethan listened, he realized how much he had grown since leaving Earth. Once hesitant to step outside his comfort zone, he now embraced opportunities to connect with people whose lives were vastly different from his own. That night, as they camped under the stars, Lyra turned to Ethan with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder what the future holds?" she asked. For us? For our worlds? Ethan considered the question for a moment before responding. Sometimes. But I try not to focus too much on what might happen. Instead, I think about what we can do right now, how we can keep moving forward, no matter what comes our way. Lyra smiled, reaching out to take his hand. That's why I chose you, Ethan. Not because you're fearless or perfect, but because you believe in possibility. And because you remind me that change starts with small steps. In the months and years that followed, Ethan and Lyra continued to work side by side, shaping a brighter future for their people. They faced setbacks and triumphs alike, but their bond only grew stronger with time. Together, they proved that leadership wasn't about dominance. It was about partnership, understanding, and the courage to embrace uncertainty. As they stood together on a balcony overlooking the city one evening, Ethan felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The road ahead would always be unpredictable, but he knew one thing for certain. He had found his place in the universe, not as a conqueror or savior, but as someone willing to listen, learn, and grow. And beside him, Lyra shone like a beacon of hope, reminding him that even the smallest actions could ripple outward, changing lives in ways no one could foresee. Under the vast expanse of stars, Ethan and Lyra looked toward the future, not with fear or doubt, but with unwavering resolve. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, united by a shared vision of peace, progress, and possibility.